Back in the old days when they used to have, water around the castle, basically a moat. Well, we're here with a modern day moat builder. We're here with Bob Bluhm, who is really one of the top. He's the godfather of asset protection in the United States. He knows asset protection better than whatever your business is. He's been doing it for a while, and this is a treat to have him here. My name is Kenneth French with VastSolutionsGroup.com. Bob, hey, it's a huge pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Thanks, Kenner. Pleasure to be with you.
All right, let's kick this off. We have about a half an hour. We're going to be talking really in depth about really the basics of asset protection. So the people here really are going to walk away saying, "Oh, I understand asset protection, and maybe even how it relates to me as an entrepreneur." So why don't I'm going to throw out kind of a tough question. What's the most important element of asset protection that every entrepreneur needs to know?
Well, I would think that the most important thing that an entrepreneur needs to know is don't do business as a sole proprietor. Don't do business in your personal name. That's basic 101 asset protection. And, if anybody has any questions like why, what's wrong with that? The short answer is because you and the business are one. There's no separation between you and the business. And if you get sued for some reason, like you're in a car accident, and they get a judgment against you, they can take both your personal assets and your business assets, and that can be a disaster. You can lose your business. On the other hand, if your business gets sued, then they can take your business assets and your personal assets because, once again, there's no separation between business and personal. So using an entity, whether that entity is a corporation, a limited liability company, a limited partnership, is really important, because then there is a separation. If your business gets sued, your personal assets are protected. If you get sued personally, your business assets are protected, out of reach of creditors. So basic 101, that is key. Don't do business as a sole proprietor. It's the worst way you could do business from a liability standpoint. You have a much higher audit risk, about a 400% higher risk of an IRS audit as a sole proprietor, and you have the least tax benefits as a result. So it's like the triple crown of disasters doing business as a sole proprietor. And I assume most people here as entrepreneurs know that and are not doing business as a sole proprietor.
I don't know about that. I think some of them do. I'm blown away by how many do think, I'll just do it as a sole prop, and they end up getting a big net worth. Maybe, hopefully it's not too late, but sometimes that does happen. But whatever, we can agree to disagree. But luckily, hopefully we're here educating. No, I know we're here educating some of the business owners out there, so now they'll know that they really should, have proper entity structures, because if they don't, they really put themselves at risk.
Right. That's so cool.
So let's get at it. Let's get right at it. I'm going to give a summary of it, really, an overview. I really think of it as cheap insurance, cheap business insurance, because in the United States, everyone's getting sued, it seems like. Sometimes there's professional litigants out there that are suing people, business owners, just because they know that the business owner will cave. So I think when people see a properly structured, really, lawyers see a properly structured, let's say, asset protection plan, really, they probably won't go after that person. And I think that's very big, because, man, that attorney knows that I'm going to do a lot of work and not get my, 30%, 40%, so they shy away. I think that's the biggest benefit to a properly structured estate plan, asset protection plan.
Well, it is, and you're right that there are professional litigants out there. There are people who do nothing but file lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. There was one firm that was uncovered a little while ago that, because the principle is this: if you have a website, it has to be what is called ADA compliant. That's the Americans with Disabilities Act. Must be compliant so that people who are hearing impaired, are vision impaired, have to be able to still access the information on your website. And there was a law firm that went through website after website after website, and was, the minute they found one that was not ADA compliant, they sent a letter, threatening to sue, and did file plenty of lawsuits, but it was just a litigation mill. And there are lawsuits. I mean, there are firms out there who do nothing but litigation, and they make their living at it. And it's a sad commentary on our society, but that happens.
I had no clue. That scares me. That's a whole nother episode, by the way. So tell me a little bit, because everyone watching and listening to this is a real estate investor, at least not, or for us, 93%. Who's us? I'm at vastsolutionsgroup.com. You're with Asset Defense Team.com. So wait a minute. So most of our people are real estate investors. I think most people think, oh my gosh, that's a rich person because they own real estate. And if they own it in an entity, in an LLC, as an example, it's going to be a little bit harder to attack that person. But anyway, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We're still talking about the basics of asset protection. So let's say, as an example, I have two properties, and I own, let's just say both are worth $1 million, and I have $250,000 of equity. Should I strip them out into two different LLCs or have them into one LLC? And I know you're going to say it depends, but let's just say you're not going to say it depends. What are your thoughts there?
Well, it depends. Sorry, Kevin.
Great.
And I'll give you an example. Sorry, but it's not just a simple answer of yes, no, one LLC per property or one property per LLC. Not that. There are many different ways to think about it, and I'll give you an example. In the example you gave, we have two properties with $250,000 of equity in each one. Okay, we're not talking fair market value, not talking ARV. We're talking equity, actual equity, which is the fair market value minus the mortgage. That is the equity. So, if someone has $500,000 of equity, meaning two properties at $250 each, and you have a $500,000 total net worth, it may not be a good idea to have those two properties in one LLC. Now, I'm going to want to explain something about inside and outside lawsuits in a minute.
Okay.
However, if you have a $5 million net worth, you may be comfortable having $500,000 of equity in one LLC. All right. So it really does depend upon you. It depends on the property. It depends on your age. It depends on so many other things. You know, are you just in the process of building your portfolio? Are you at the end of building your portfolio? How much cash flow does each property produce, et cetera? All of those questions. Now, I have to explain quickly the difference between an inside and an outside lawsuit.
Yeah, please.
Outside lawsuit is a classic example. You're in a car accident. They get a judgment against you because it was your fault. In that case, the judgment is against you personally, and they can only take personal assets, or rather assets you own in your personal name. Assets that are owned in an LLC are off limits because they don't have a judgment against the LLC. So in other words, in an outside lawsuit, defined as the harm occurs outside of the LLC, your business assets in an LLC are safe. All right. The opposite is true in an inside lawsuit. This is where the harm occurs inside the LLC. Classic example, there's a slip and fall. There's a fire. There's an injury on the property. The injured party sues the owner of the property, which is the LLC, and assuming they get a judgment against the LLC, they could take assets in the LLC. Now, I'm going to make up some numbers. You gave an example, $500,000 of equity. Let's say we had those two properties in the LLC, but they got a judgment for $1.2 million.
Okay, yeah.
Let's say we didn't have any insurance coverage. We're leaving that out of the picture, okay?
Okay.
A $1.2 million judgment against the LLC means they can take the two properties with $500,000 worth of equity. But there's a $700,000 difference.
Right.
That they didn't collect. Now, if you have other properties in other LLCs, can they go to those LLCs and take those properties? And the answer is no. They didn't have a judgment against those other LLCs. The other question, could they come after you, Ken or French, personally to make up the $700,000 difference? And the answer is no, because as a member of an LLC, you have no personal liability. So if, and there are some qualifications here, but if the entity has been, the LLC has been set up properly, if it's been properly documented, and if it's been operated in a business-like manner, then with all those qualifications, you have no personal liability, and other assets in other LLCs are protected. So, in other words, you have limited your liability only to the assets within that one LLC, hence the term limited liability company.
So let's talk about that. You brought up something very, very important: properly structured LLC or entity. Now, that's I would say it seems to me most of the LLCs we review, I'm not going to say it's a whole bunch, but it's enough. I would say most of them are not properly structured. So let's talk about the alter ego. The idea that it's not properly structured, therefore it piercing the veil. I think that's still, we're talking about the basics and fundamentals of asset protection, by the way. And hopefully that all fits within there. But let's talk about that, because I think that's huge, huge. Let's talk about piercing the veil. What happens if it's not properly structured, meaning the LLC or the entity is not properly structured, and then the veil is pierced, as they call it?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is the starting point. Is the LLC properly structured? What we mean by that is it set up in a state where the laws actually protect, as opposed to states where the laws are very weak and do not really protect an LLC owner. There are a number of states, you can imagine the usual suspects: California, New York, Illinois, who that allow foreclosure of an LLC interest, meaning that, and it, just like a corporation, when you own the stock of a corporation and you get sued personally, they can take the ownership or the stock of the corporation from you. And that's essentially foreclosure of an LLC interest. Now, in other words, you can lose your LLC interest. Also, those states have very weak protection laws, which allow the veil to be pierced very easily, which means that they can break through the LLC and get at your personal assets. The LLC is supposed to be a shield where a lawsuit bounces off the LLC and your personal assets are safe. All right. Of course, in an outside lawsuit, we're talking about now. So the LLC has to be properly structured. In other words, it needs to be set up in a state where the laws are going to be strong enough to protect your interest. Second of all, the type of LLC. Is it a single member LLC or is it a multi-member LLC? And single member LLCs are notoriously weak for protecting. And there are only 7 states that currently have a statute that says an LLC, a single member LLC, is just as protective as a multi-member LLC. The other 43 states are either silent on that, or they actually say that no, a single member LLC does not protect personal assets. So we have to have the LLC structured properly. These are just a couple of examples of structuring properly. Next, the LLC has to have proper documentation. And sad to say, when I ask people to send me when they say, I've already got an LLC, great. I'll say, would you send me the documents so we can review them? And believe it or not, we'll see an operating agreement with fill in the blanks.
Yeah. And not filled in, huh?
Yeah, and they haven't even been filled in.
Yeah, I knew you said that.
They've been filled in, but I mean, usually filled in incorrectly, and all kinds of mistakes made, and those are not properly documented LLCs, and the likelihood of veil piercing is very, very high with those LLCs. Also, proper documentation basically means that we have to follow corporate formalities. The judges expect you to treat your LLC as if you had loads of other third parties as members of the LLC. Think of like a bunch of stockholders who may or may not like you. And you've got to respect the rights of those other owners of the LLC. Now, you may say, well, I'm the only owner of the LLC. Well, still treat it as if you're not the only owner of the LLC. Treat it with formalities in mind. Formal minutes, formal resolutions, formal actions taken by the LLC. And you say, well, that's silly. I mean, that's just kind of going through the motions. Well, that's what's required in order to have limited liability. That's what the courts require. And the bottom line is these are not minor issues. I mean, 50% of the cases where the LLC, where the veil is challenged, pierced. The veil is pierced in half or over half of the cases. So it's a serious matter.
Let's talk about that. That's
Yeah.
huge. What you just said is, I think, really big. So what you're telling me is, and I know the answer, but this is fun here. If I go to court and I don't, let's just say I'm an LLC, I think I am totally protected, and then the veil is pierced, if you will. You're saying, let's just say I have let's have a $10 million portfolio, and let's just pretend all of it's in that LLC, just to pretend, right? And I have other entities also with houses. Just to double check, what you're telling me is if that veil is pierced, if that corporate veil is pierced, therefore they can go after my other assets, even though I thought everything was running like a perfect company. All correct?
Well, essentially, yes. And
No.
they can do reverse veil piercing, where they get a judgment against you personally, but now they're going to pierce the veil of the LLC,
Good
or
point.
the other way around, where they're suing the LLC in an inside lawsuit, but the LLC is so weak that they can pierce it and get at your personal assets. And that was the example of $500,000 of equity, $1.2 million judgment. Normally, when everything's working right, they can't get the other $700,000 from you personally. But now if they pierce the corporate veil, they can get the other $700,000 from you, from your personal assets. So yeah, veil piercing is very important. Now there's a third element to this, and that is the LLC has to be structured properly, has to be properly documented, but then you have to operate it in a business-like manner. In other words, treat it like a real corporation. And we touched on a little bit about that. In other words, when you're going to take a major action, such as buying a piece of real estate, merging with another company, bringing another partner on, maybe bringing another owner on, we have to document that in minutes, resolutions, etc. Another aspect is, how do we operate it from a banking standpoint? Does the LLC have a bank account? It should, but you'd be surprised how many people set up an LLC and they just run it out of their personal bank account. We cannot commingle funds. In other words, the funds of the company belong to the company. Now you may say, well, it's my company. Well, yes, but you have to treat it once again as if you have other shareholders in the company, and they are going to object if you simply take company money and pay personal bills from that business account. That's called commingling business assets. That's the death knell. That will cause the veil to be pierced. So we've got to operate it in a business-like manner, the way somebody would operate a publicly traded company, for instance. So we've got to observe what are called corporate formalities in order for the veil to hold and actually protect us from personal liability.
It really is surprising how many people just think, they have they don't even have a checking account for the LLC. They think, oh, no big deal. They don't do the compliance. 5 years down the road, something happens. And that's really the scary part, because they think everything's going correctly with that LLC, but it hasn't been running correctly. And I think then that's when an attorney on the opposing side could come in and say, well, you haven't been operating in a company. It's your alter ego. Therefore, you end up getting sued. And especially if someone's taken 10, 15 years to amass a pretty good net worth, and then all of a sudden it's gone in one fell swoop. That's some sad stuff right there, Yes. But then again, I think we're in a very litigious society, and one way of taking care of it is a properly structured entity. So, all right. So, and I'm going to assume, no, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to throw this out. I'm going to assume one of those, those online things where I can get an LLC. Let's say, as an example, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than that. Let's say I have 5 properties in 5 different states. It seems most of those LLC groups, online groups that put together LLCs, they don't do any general consultation. You could just get one LLC, get another LLC. Therefore, people don't know what they're doing if they have properties in a number of different states, let's say 5 states, and they have them in LLCs, which is great. But then again, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know the plan. They don't have a good plan. They don't have a good structure as a result of that. And online groups don't do that, based on what I believe. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're right. And one of the issues is, and one of the big differences, I should say, is when we meet with a client to learn about their business, learn about their goals, learn about what their purpose of their LLC or company is supposed to be, then we're able to design it. So the starting point really is, what is the purpose of the LLC? What is it supposed to do? And how, where is it going to operate? What state will it operate in?
Yeah.
How do you want it to be taxed? And a lot of people are not aware that an LLC has 4 possibilities of how it could be taxed: as an S corporation, as a C corporation, as a sole proprietorship, or as a partnership. What's the proper method for taxation for your particular type of business? That's very important because it depends upon whether you're going to pay a lot of tax or very little tax. Um, Another aspect is not only what state should we set it up in, but how many members should there be? Should it be a single member LLC? Should it be a multi-member LLC?
Mhm.
Is this going to be an entity that's going to own assets, or is it going to be an entity that is merely an operating company or a service company? Other aspects are what do we want the as I mentioned, who do we want the members to be? Do we want it to be individuals? Do we want it to be a trust? Do we want it to be another LLC, which would be a holding company? All these aspects are prerequisites to setting up an LLC, or there's steps to think through setting up an LLC. And you may think, well, those are easy. Well, not at all. I mean, we may have 2 or 3 consultations with a client. We may get the client's CPA involved to determine, what is the best approach for this particular client. And only then, after plenty of consultations, after understanding their business, after designing the LLC on paper, would we ever start pushing buttons to create the LLC. Because creating an LLC is very simple. I mean, it's a matter of, answering 4 or 5 questions on a Secretary of State website, and boom, you're done. Well, that's the beginning of an LLC. That's not an LLC that's going to protect you.
That's right there. So that's exactly right. I think starting an LLC, it's easy. I think anyone could do it, but it's the upkeep that makes the difference, and that's what can burn you in court. I think so. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I think to me that's the biggest thing. I mean, again, anyway, I could put together an LLC, maybe not, but the thought is, down the road, when you're not doing your compliance, you don't have a bank account, let's say, or you don't know the laws that have changed that some clause needs to be in the LLC, let's say, because you're bringing on a partner, you're bringing on another project, or whatever the case is. And that's the biggest thing that's really a lawyer is needed for. And if the lawyer didn't put together the LLC in the first place, they're probably going to need to change the LLC and redo it, and it's going to end up costing more than doing it online in the first place.
Right. So, the real value is in the planning of the LLC, designing the LLC. That's what takes the time. That's what takes the expertise. And that's what you do not get with the online services, because the online services just give you a website and say, start telling me what's the name of the LLC and the state where you want to set it up in, and the name of the registered agent, and boom, you're done. You got supposedly an LLC with no thought that's really gone into it. And that's the major difference.
And do you do just compliance for LLCs? Let's just say someone put together an LLC. Do you come in and do reviews afterwards and change them afterwards? Or what's your role maybe a couple years down the road?
All the time. And a lot of times we'll find clients with an LLC that they set up themselves with inadequate documentation, or maybe no documentation at all, no operating agreement, or maybe worse yet, an operating agreement that they got for free on the internet that they've never read, that they're not following, because the operating agreement is essentially the rules of how you need to operate the LLC. So all of those things we review with them and say, did you intend this LLC to be taxed as an S corporation? And if not, well, then why do we have an S corporation designation? Did you clear this with your CPA? Et cetera, et cetera. So all kinds of issues. We go back over, we fix the LLC, and plug the holes, plug the gaps that are there, and provide the documentation. And then we can do compliance checks as well. A lot of times, very sophisticated clients, you'll be surprised, will say, I need you to look at this LLC, and we'll go to the Secretary of State website and find that it's been dissolved.
Oh, yeah.
Failure to file the annual report, and the client is not even aware that it has been dissolved. So we go back, we reinstate the LLC. But here's the problem. If the LLC has been dissolved and there is a lawsuit, there is no protection. It's as if you are a sole proprietor and your personal assets are at risk. So it's really very important to, dot the I's, cross the T's. Entrepreneurs are not wired that way a lot of times. That's why you hire a law firm to do it. That's why you hire a VA or assistant to take care of these things. But it's got to be done. Otherwise, you're exposed on a personal level.
Yeah. Okay. You bring up a huge question. By the way, we're going to, in just a few minutes, Bob's going to go over a bonus that he's going to be providing for those who are watching and listening. So let's just say I've completely messed up. My LLC has been dissolved. And no, there's no lawsuit, but I want it cleaned up. Do you do that?
Sure. Do it all the time.
Okay. All right. So you basically do anything with respect to LLCs, any element of asset protection, that is something you do.
Yeah. And keep in mind, an LLC is just one of many important entities that could be set up. We can use a combination of trusts, and LLCs. There are many different kinds of trusts. There are privacy trusts. There are personal property trusts. There are many, of course, revocable living trusts for estate planning purposes. Trusts in and of themselves can give you anonymity, can give you financial privacy. They don't necessarily protect you from liability the way a limited liability company or limited partnership does. We consider the tax aspects of wanting to set up the entity in a way that will minimize taxes, will minimize your risk of an IRS audit. So all these considerations are very important in setting up any kind of entity or any kind of an asset protection plan.
And do you do, actually we're going to have to close up shop here in a couple of minutes, but do you work with beginning entrepreneurs all the way to someone who has no entity whatsoever, who's just thinking about getting an entity, all the way to someone who's experienced, who's got, I'm pretending, $100 million, anywhere in between? Is that the case?
Yes, all the way from the beginning to very complex, simple to complex. And it's important for people just getting started to start out with the right entity. Don't get the cart before the horse, and get the entity set up properly and the structure set up properly. Sometimes there's going to need to be more than one type of entity. A lot of times we'll run into entrepreneurs who already have a business of some kind, but now they want to branch into real estate. They want to take the earnings from their business, invest it into real estate. And so they have a couple of different companies. So they may not analyze it that way, but that's really what they have. And we can provide the appropriate structure for whatever they have.
Awesome. All right. I stole your thunder last time that we were talking about this, but what's the big bonus that everyone's talking about, or that I think is unbelievable, that I'm still blown away about what you do for your hour? Go ahead and outline that, because I think it's a big bonus.
Yeah, steal the thunder. Okay, go right ahead.
It blows me away. So Bob's time, this comes from the heart. Bob's an unbelievable guy. I've known him for a long time, number one. Number two, he's a giver. He really is a giver. He wants to help clients. I mean, he wants to help the underdog. That's the way I look at it. He wants to help the entrepreneur who's struggling, who needs a hand. And what he is willing to do is provide an hour of consultation free of charge. Now, with no strings attached. He hopes probably that you're going to do business with him, but he will really spend an hour of his time speaking with you in a way to help you, if it's asset protection all the way to estate planning and anywhere in between. And so what I would say is take him up on that, because his hour is, you'll be transformed afterwards. It's that big of a deal that he's doing this, spending an hour of his time to help you as an entrepreneur. Give me some comments about that. That blows me away, Bob.
Well, that's the case for now. I don't know how long we have to do that.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good.
Yeah. But we are offering that, and it is something that we do because you're right, Kenner. I mean, at heart, we're teachers. We want to make sure that people are well educated as to why we do what we do. In other words, why do you need to operate your entity in such a way? Why do you need to have it structured this way? What's the consequence if we don't structure it that way? So in other words, we want to make sure that people not only have the right type of structure, but they understand why they have that type of structure and how they're going to use that structure to continue to protect themselves. Because it's one thing to have the right structure, but if you don't know how to use it, then why did we bother to set it up? So we want to make sure people use their service companies as an operating company, use their holding company as a holding company, use their entities that own the real estate in the proper way, and make sure they all interact with one another the proper way.
Yeah, I'm totally convinced. I'm not just saying that because I get benefits in any way, but what I would say is the time you and I have spent together, because sometimes, people have convinced me because I work with some cheap, rich people, they're, I don't want to spend money on an attorney. But if you really think about it, it totally saves money. It's peace of mind at the end of the day. You could put your head on your pillow knowing that it's been taken care of, you're properly structured, because nobody wants to have their corporate veil pierced. If they do, they could lose everything. I mean, I have a client who's worth a lot of it. No, I'll think of one client specifically. Let me go through this, Bob. I'm taking a little bit more time than I should. But he came to us, had about a $10 million net worth, was doing his own taxes. Everything was under his own Social Security. He didn't have any entities that had killer net worth based on really not working hard. But at the same time, he was, I don't know how old he was. Let's say he was 60. Now, let's just say, someone came and did a slip and fall on one of his properties, and he's thinking, oh, I'm fine for retirement, right? And then all of a sudden, it could all be gone in a fell swoop. And that's the thing. That scares me right there. That's a story that really scares me,
Yeah, well, it should, because it's very true. It's very real. And it's happened far more times than you can imagine. This is not the kind of thing people talk about at cocktail parties. Hey, I was rich and I lost everything, because I was a stupid.
That's good. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was dumb. So it's not something that you hear about, because nobody's going to advertise the fact that they've just lost everything.
Yeah.
But it happens so much more often than you can even imagine.
That's true. That's a good point. No one's going to brag about that, huh?
Right. Yeah. People talk about their wins, but they never talk about their losses. And so it's the kind of thing we hear about all the time. And it's something that can be avoided with just a little bit of foresight, a little bit of planning, and a little bit of work.
And I think everyone needs a good estate planning, good asset protection attorney on their side. And, that free hour you're doing, it's a big benefit. But also, I think you're doing a lot of content and educating people along the way. And there's different ways. We're going to show different ways that you're doing that in later series. So please stick with us for, we're doing a series of these conversations where they're going to add value to entrepreneurs. And really, it's going to be, we're doing this as a way of helping entrepreneurs out there who are needing help with their, in this case, asset protection or estate plan or whatever the case is. So we really appreciate you spending the time with us. But before we sign off, Bob, how does someone get a hold of you? That's very important.
You can call our office, normal business hours, Monday through Friday, at 945-542-7738. Or you can contact us at info@assetdefenseteam.com. He's
Bob Bluhm, and I'm Kenner French. He's with Asset Defense Team. I'm with vastsolutionsgroup.com. If you need anything from me, go to the website at vastsolutionsgroup.com. Once again, Bob, I really appreciate you spending the time.
Thanks, Kenner.